"There's someone watching the house," the boy whispered from the doorway. Dr. Elena Torres froze mid-sentence, her fingers hovering above the keyboard where she'd been drafting her keynote speech for the Global Health Summit. The afternoon light filtered through floor-to-ceiling windows of her Boston brownstone, illuminating shelves packed with medical journals and framed awards. But that warmth couldn't reach the sudden chills spreading through the room. She turned slowly in her leather chair. "Leo, what did you say?" The 12-year-old stood half-hidden behind the doorframe, his slim fingers gripping the mahogany molding like an anchor. Leo, her nephew, the quiet boy who'd come to live with her 8 months ago after the car accident that took his mother. "Elena's only sister." "Someone's been watching," Leo repeated, his voice steadier now as he stepped into the study. His dark eyes were wide behind wire-rimmed glasses. But there was something else there too. Certainty. "I mapped the pattern. They use 3 different vehicles. They rotate every 48 hours. Elena set down her coffee cup with deliberate care. "Mapped the pattern?" Leo pulled a worn notebook from his hoodie pocket and opened it to reveal pages of meticulous notes. License plates, timestamps, vehicle descriptions, even crude sketches of the drivers. "I started tracking them 2 weeks ago. At first I thought maybe I was being paranoid, but then I ran the plates through a public database at the library. They're all registered to shell companies." For a long moment, Elena simply stared at her nephew. In the months since he'd arrived, traumatized, grieving, barely speaking, she'd given him everything she could. Therapy sessions with Dr. Reeves, a private tutor to help him catch up on missed schoolwork, a bedroom filled with books and art supplies. What she hadn't given him was a reason to trust the world again. And yet here he stood, having spent 2 weeks quietly investigating something he was afraid to tell her about. "Leo?" she said carefully. "Why didn't you come to me sooner?" His shoulders hunched inward. "Because you're about to expose the pharmaceutical companies. I read the draft of your testimony on your desk last week. I know what you're planning to say at the summit. And I thought if I told you someone was watching, you'd think I was trying to stop you. That I was scared and making things up." Elena's throat tightened. "Come here." He crossed the Persian rug hesitantly and she pulled him into a hug. He was all sharp angles and nervous energy, but he didn't pull away. "I believe you," she said firmly. "Show me everything." 20 minutes later, they sat side by side at her desk, Leo's notebook spread open between them. Elena's mind raced as she reviewed his observations. The pattern was undeniable. Surveillance, professional and systematic. "There's something else," Leo said quietly. He pulled out his tablet and opened a scanning app. "I've been running network diagnostics on our home system. 3 days ago, I found an unauthorized device on our Wi-Fi. Someone planted a signal interceptor somewhere in this house." Elena felt her pulse quicken. "Where?" "I think it's in the living room. The signal's strongest there." Together, they moved downstairs. The living room looked exactly as it always did. Tasteful, comfortable, filled with her sister's paintings that Elena couldn't bear to take down. Leo moved methodically, holding his tablet up near the walls, the furniture, the decorative pieces. The tablet beeped near the antique clock on the mantelpiece, a gift from Marcus Hale, her research partner and the man she'd been dating for the past year. Elena lifted the clock carefully. Behind it, barely visible in the shadow of the mantel, was a tiny black device no larger than a shirt button. "That's a listening device," Leo whispered. "Commercial grade. You can buy them online, but they're usually marketed for corporate security." Elena stared at the device, then at the clock Marcus had given her, inscribed with the words, "To Elena. May you always have time for what matters." Ma'am." "Leo," she said, her voice barely audible. "I need you to check the whole house. Every room. Use that app and make a list of every unauthorized device you find." He nodded and disappeared upstairs while Elena stood alone in the living room, the clock still in her hands. Marcus had been by her side through the hardest year of her life. He'd helped her grieve for her sister. He'd welcomed Leo into their circle. He'd championed her research on pharmaceutical price manipulation and monopolistic practices. Or had he? Her phone buzzed. A text from Marcus. "Dinner tonight? Miss you?" We need to talk about the summit." She deleted the message without responding. By evening, Leo had found 5 devices, 1 in her study, 2 in the living room, 1 in the guest bathroom, and 1 in her bedroom, each positioned to capture conversations, phone calls, private moments. Elena sat at her kitchen table, hands wrapped around a mug of tea that had long gone cold. Leo sat across from her, watching her face with concern. "What are we going to do?" he asked. She looked up at him, this boy who'd lost everything and still found the courage to protect her. "We're going to find out who's behind this, and then we're going to make them regret ever thinking they could silence me." Part 2. The Allies. Elena spent the next morning making phone calls from a secure line at her hospital office. The first was to Rebecca Zhang, an old friend from medical school who'd left clinical practice to work in cybersecurity consulting. Rebecca arrived at Elena's brownstone that afternoon, carrying 2 large cases of equipment and wearing her characteristic leather jacket over surgical scrubs, a woman who'd never quite left medicine behind. "Leo," Rebecca said, shaking the boy's hand with genuine respect after Elena made introductions, "your initial reconnaissance was excellent. Most adults wouldn't have caught what you did." Leo's cheeks flushed with pride. Rebecca swept the house with professional-grade equipment, confirming Leo's findings and discovering 2 additional devices, one embedded in Elena's laptop charger and another in the ventilation grate of her study. "This is sophisticated," Rebecca said, laying out the devices on Elena's dining room table. "These aren't cheap spy store gadgets. This is corporate-level surveillance. Someone invested serious money into watching you." "Marcus gave me that laptop charger," Elena said quietly. "Said my old one was fraying and he didn't want me to risk a fire." Rebecca's expression darkened. "When?" 3 months ago, right after I submitted my initial testimony draft to the Senate committee." "And when did he give you that clock?" 6 months ago, right before I started the pharmaceutical pricing research." The pieces were falling into place, and Elena hated every moment of it. That evening, Marcus let himself into the brownstone using the key she'd given him, something she was already regretting. He carried takeout bags from her favorite Thai restaurant and wore the smile that had first drawn her to him. Warm, genuine, disarming. "There's my brilliant doctor," he said, leaning in for a kiss. Elena offered her cheek. "Long day." His smile faltered slightly. "Everything okay?" "Just stressed about the summit. You know how it is." Marcus set down the food and studied her. "Elena, what's wrong?" Before she could answer, Leo appeared in the hallway. Marcus's expression shifted, just for a second, into something Elena had never seen before. Irritation? Calculation? It was gone so quickly she almost thought she'd imagined it. "Hey, Leo," Marcus said with forced cheerfulness. "How's the science project going?" "Fine," Leo said flatly. "Listen," Marcus said, turning back to Elena. "I wanted to talk to you about the testimony. Some of the pharmaceutical representatives reached out to me. They're concerned about the data you're planning to present." Elena's blood ran cold. "You've been discussing my testimony with them?" "Just preliminary conversations," Marcus said quickly. "They want to find common ground before this becomes adversarial. I thought I could help broker a compromise." "A compromise," Elena repeated slowly, "on exposing price-fixing and monopolistic practices that are killing patients." Marcus held up his hands. "I'm on your side, Elena. I just think there might be a smarter way to approach this, one that doesn't put you in the crosshairs of some very powerful people. Get out." He blinked. "What?" "Get out of my house now." "Elena, you're being irrational." "I'm being clear-headed for the first time in months. Leave your key on the table." Marcus's expression hardened into something unfamiliar and ugly. "You're making a mistake. Those pharmaceutical companies will destroy you. At least with me, you had protection. I don't need protection from someone who's been spying on me." His face went pale. "I don't know what you're talking about." Elena held up the listening device from the clock. "Yes, you do." For a long moment, Marcus simply stared at the device. Then his shoulders sagged, and the mask finally fell away. "They told me it was just about staying ahead of the narrative. About protecting you." "Who is they?" He shook his head. You really don't understand what you're up against, do you? This isn't just about one company or one CEO. You're threatening an entire infrastructure. Billions of dollars in revenue, political connections that reach into Congress, the FDA, the White House. Then I guess I'd better bring a bigger weapon, Elena said coldly. Get out. After Marcus left, Elena, Leo, and Rebecca sat in the study with all the devices laid out before them. We need to go deeper, Rebecca said. These listening devices feed to a local receiver somewhere nearby. If we can trace the signal, we can find out where your data is going and who's collecting it. Leo was already pulling up code on his laptop. I can write a program to triangulate the transmission points. Rebecca smiled. You really are brilliant, kid. Over the next 3 days, they worked in secret. Leo's triangulation program led them to a building in Cambridge, a nondescript office complex that housed several tech startups and consulting firms. Rebecca's investigation revealed that the 5th floor was leased to a company called Meridian Strategic Communications. Front company, Rebecca said, pulling up corporate filings, owned by a larger entity called Helix Advisory Group, which is owned by... She scrolled further. Novus Pharmaceutical Solutions. Elena's hands clenched. Novus is one of the companies I'm testifying against. They manufacture insulin and have raised prices over 800% in the last decade. They're not just watching you, Rebecca said grimly. They're building a case against you. This level of surveillance means they're looking for anything. Personal indiscretions, financial irregularities, anything they can use to discredit you before the summit. Then we give them what they want, Elena said slowly. A plan was forming. We feed them false information, make them think they know what I'm going to say, and then we pull the rug out from under them. Part 3. The counter-strike. Elena spent the next week performing an elaborate deception. She left the surveillance devices in place and crafted carefully scripted phone conversations discussing a modified testimony that would be less aggressive toward the pharmaceutical industry. She drafted fake documents outlining watered-down reforms and made sure to leave them visible on her laptop screen. Meanwhile, the real work happened elsewhere. Rebecca arranged for Elena to meet with Senator Patricia Morrison, chair of the Senate Health Committee and a fierce advocate for healthcare reform. They met in an unmarked location, a secure conference room in a building owned by one of Rebecca's cybersecurity clients. Dr. Torres, Senator Morrison said, gripping Elena's hand firmly, I've been following your research for the past year. What you've uncovered is extraordinary. Elena laid out the evidence, not just the surveillance, but the deeper investigation she, Rebecca, and Leo had conducted over the past 2 weeks. They'd traced financial connections between Novus Pharmaceuticals and 3 other major drug manufacturers, revealing a coordinated effort to manipulate pricing across multiple medication categories. They're not just monitoring me, Elena explained. They're systematically targeting any researcher or physician who speaks out against pricing practices. I'm not the only one who's been surveilled. I contacted 4 other doctors who've testified before Congress in the past 2 years. All of them reported suspicious activity. Break-ins, digital security breaches, even harassment of family members. Senator Morrison's jaw tightened. This is conspiracy to intimidate federal witnesses. Exactly. And I can prove it. What Elena had that the pharmaceutical companies didn't know about was Leo's digital forensics work. The boy had turned out to have an extraordinary gift for data analysis. He'd hacked into the Meridian, strategic communication servers, with Rebecca's guidance and, through legal gray areas that made Elena uncomfortable but seemed necessary, and extracted months of surveillance reports, not just on Elena, but on over 20 healthcare advocates, journalists, and government officials. The summit is in 3 days, Elena said. I want to testify not just about pharmaceutical pricing, but about this entire operation. I want to expose every connection, every illegal action, every attempt to silence the truth. Senator Morrison nodded slowly. It's going to get ugly. They'll come after you with everything they have. Elena thought of her sister, who died because she couldn't afford the insulin that Novus manufactured. Insulin that cost $30 to produce and sold for $350. She thought of Leo, who'd learned to trust again despite every reason not to. "Let them try," Elena said. The night before the summit, Marcus showed up at Elena's door unannounced. She opened it to find him disheveled, desperate, nothing like the polished research partner she'd once known. "Don't do this," he pleaded. "They're going to destroy you. Your career, your reputation, everything. They have lawyers, investigators, media connections. You can't win." Elena regarded him coldly. "Why are you really here, Marcus? Did they send you to make one last attempt at controlling the narrative?" He flinched. "I never wanted it to go this far. When they first approached me, it seemed harmless. They just wanted information about what you were researching. They said it would help them prepare better responses, be more transparent. I thought I was helping bridge the gap between medicine and industry." "And when did you realize it wasn't harmless?" He looked away. "When they asked me to plant the devices, when they told me to get close to you, to monitor your conversations with Leo, when they started asking about your mental health, your sister's death, looking for weaknesses to exploit. And you did it anyway." "I was in debt," Marcus said, his voice breaking. "Medical school loans, credit cards, a gambling problem I hadn't told anyone about. They offered to make it all disappear. All I had to do was keep them informed." Elena felt a wave of something between pity and disgust. "You sold out for money. You put a child at risk. You betrayed everything we're supposed to stand for as physicians." "I'm sorry," he whispered. "So am I. Now leave before I have Rebecca's security team remove you." He left, shoulders hunched, a broken man. Elena watched him go and felt nothing. The Senate hearing room was packed. Cameras lined the back wall. Journalists filled the press gallery, and the panel of senators sat in elevated chairs like judges. In the audience, Elena spotted Rebecca and Leo sitting together, both wearing expressions of fierce determination. Elena took her seat at the witness table, adjusted the microphone and pulled out her prepared testimony. But she didn't look at it. Instead, she looked directly at the cameras. "My name is Dr. Elena Torres," she began, "and I'm here to discuss not just pharmaceutical pricing, but something far more sinister. Over the past 8 months, I've been under systematic surveillance by representatives of Novus Pharmaceuticals and 3 other major drug manufacturers. This surveillance was designed to intimidate me, to discredit me, and to silence my testimony today." A murmur rippled through the room. Senator Morrison leaned forward, her expression grave but supportive. Elena continued, laying out the evidence piece by piece. The listening devices, the financial connections, the surveillance of other healthcare advocates, the coordination between multiple pharmaceutical companies. As she spoke, Rebecca transmitted documents to the committee's servers, the surveillance reports, the corporate filings, the proof of illegal wiretapping and witness intimidation. "But here's what they didn't count on," Elena said, her voice strengthening. "They didn't count on a 12-year-old boy with more integrity in his little finger than their entire executive boards combined. My nephew Leo noticed their surveillance and had the courage to investigate it. He protected me when he should have been worried about homework and video games. He trusted the truth when he'd been given every reason not to trust anything." She looked at Leo, who was trying very hard not to cry. "This testimony today isn't just about drug prices," Elena continued. "It's about the cost of silence. It's about what happens when profit matters more than patients. It's about an industry so threatened by transparency that they resort to illegal surveillance, witness intimidation, and conspiracy." She placed a thick folder on the table. In this folder is evidence of systematic price fixing across multiple drug categories, affecting over 15 million American patients. It documents coordinated efforts to suppress generic competition, to manipulate FDA approval processes, and to silence anyone who threatens their profit margins. These companies are counting on us being too afraid, too overwhelmed, too cynical to fight back. They're wrong. The hearing lasted 7 hours. By the end, 3 pharmaceutical CEOs had been subpoenaed to testify, federal investigations had been opened, and Marcus Hale had been arrested for conspiracy and illegal surveillance. Part 4. The Aftermath. 6 months later, Elena stood in the kitchen of her Boston brownstone, preparing dinner while Leo did homework at the table. The house felt different now, lighter somehow, despite everything that had happened. The Senate testimony had triggered a cascade of consequences. Novus Pharmaceuticals and 2 other companies faced federal charges. The CEO of Novus resigned amid the scandal. Congressional legislation on pharmaceutical pricing reform was moving forward for the first time in decades. And Marcus? He'd taken a plea deal, agreeing to testify against the pharmaceutical executives in exchange for a reduced sentence. Elena hadn't spoken to him since the hearing. "Uncle Elena?" Leo said, looking up from his calculus textbook. He'd started calling her uncle as a joke after she'd made a bad pun, and somehow it had stuck. "Yeah? I got an email from Senator Morrison's office. They want to know if I'd be interested in a summer internship with the Senate Health Committee's Digital Security Division." Elena smiled. "What did you tell them?" "I said I'd have to ask my guardian." He grinned. "But I'm thinking yes. Someone's got to keep these politicians secure from pharmaceutical spies." She crossed the kitchen and hugged him. "Your mom would be so proud of you. You know that, right?" He nodded against her shoulder. "I know. I think she'd be proud of you too." That night, after Leo went to bed, Elena sat in her study, newly swept for surveillance devices and equipped with Rebecca's latest security system, and opened her laptop. She had 3 new requests from medical researchers around the country, all asking for her help investigating potential pharmaceutical company interference in their work. She thought about everything the last year had cost her: a relationship, her privacy, her peace of mind. But she also thought about what it had given her: a deeper relationship with Leo, a network of allies fighting for healthcare reform, and a clarity of purpose she'd never had before. Rebecca had sent her a text earlier. "You started something big. Elena, people are paying attention now." Elena typed a response. "Good. Let them watch." Part 5. Moving forward a year after the testimony, Elena received an unexpected visitor at her office at Boston General Hospital. A young woman in her 20s, nervous but determined, asked to speak with her privately. "Dr. Torres," the woman said once they were alone, "my name is Sophie Chen. I'm a research scientist at Helix Biotech. I think they're manipulating clinical trial data for a new cancer medication, and I don't know who to trust." Elena listened as Sophie described a pattern disturbingly similar to what she'd experienced. Pressure to alter findings, subtle threats, unexplained surveillance. When Sophie finished, Elena pulled out her phone and sent a text to Rebecca and Senator Morrison's office. "You came to the right place," Elena said, "and you're not going to face this alone." What had started as one woman's fight against pharmaceutical corruption had evolved into something larger: a network of healthcare advocates, researchers and whistleblowers committed to transparency and accountability. They called themselves the Helix Initiative, a name chosen by Leo, who pointed out that a helix could be fragile when pulled apart, but incredibly strong when working together. The organization operated out of a secure facility in Cambridge, funded by a coalition of healthcare reform foundations and protected by Rebecca's cybersecurity firm. Elena served as the medical director, spending half her time on clinical work and half on investigations. Leo, now 13 and frighteningly brilliant, had become the organization's youngest consultant, helping develop secure communication systems and digital forensics protocols. He still lived with Elena, still did his homework at the kitchen table, still occasionally had nightmares about the car accident that had taken his mother. But he also had purpose, community, and the knowledge that his pain had been transformed into something meaningful. One evening, as Elena and Leo walked home from the Helix Initiative offices, Leo asked the question that had been on both their minds. "Do you think we're winning?" Elena considered this carefully. "I think we're fighting, and sometimes that's enough. The pharmaceutical companies still have more money, more lawyers, more political connections, but they don't have what we have." "What's that?" "The truth, and people brave enough to speak it." They walked in companionable silence for a moment. Then Leo said, "Mom used to say that the world isn't changed by the loudest voices, but by the most persistent ones." Elena felt tears prick her eyes. She was right. She usually was, Leo said and squeezed her hand. Epilogue. 2 years later. The Senate chamber was packed again, but this time Elena sat in the gallery as a spectator. At the witness table sat Sophie Chen, now the lead whistleblower in the largest pharmaceutical fraud case in U.S. history. Beside her sat 3 other researchers, all of whom had come forward with evidence of clinical trial manipulation, price fixing, and systematic intimidation of critics. Leo, now 15 and a sophomore at MIT, early admission, sat next to Elena, taking notes on his tablet. Rebecca was there too, along with Senator Morrison, who'd sponsored the comprehensive pharmaceutical reform bill that was about to come to a vote. Elena watched as Sophie testified with the same combination of fear and courage that she remembered feeling 2 years ago. The young woman's voice shook occasionally, but she never faltered, never backed down. When Sophie finished, Elena led the applause. After the hearing, the Helix Initiative team gathered at a small restaurant in Georgetown. The mood was celebratory but tempered. They all knew this was just one battle in a much longer war. To persistent voices, Rebecca said, raising her glass. To telling the truth even when it's hard, Sophie added. Leo looked at Elena. To Uncle Elena, who taught us that protecting people is worth any cost. Elena felt her throat tighten. To all of us, she said. To everyone who refuses to be silent. To everyone who chooses courage over comfort. They clinked glasses, soda for Leo. And in that moment, Elena felt something she hadn't felt in years. Hope. Not naive hope. Not the kind that ignored reality. But the hard-won hope that comes from surviving betrayal, exposing truth, and building something stronger from the ruins. Outside the restaurant, the Washington, D.C. evening was warm and clear. Elena and Leo walked toward their hotel, both lost in thought. You know what's funny? Leo said. What? If Marcus hadn't put those listening devices in the house, if he hadn't betrayed you, I might never have learned to trust again. I might never have found my purpose. It's weird how the worst things can lead to the best outcomes. Elena stopped walking and looked at her nephew. This extraordinary young man who'd somehow found wisdom in trauma. That's not funny, Leo. That's profound, he grinned. Same thing, basically. She laughed and pulled him into a hug. Come on, genius. Let's get ice cream. But it's almost midnight. Exactly. We just helped change healthcare policy in America. We've earned midnight ice cream. As they walked down the street together, Elena thought about her sister, about Marcus's betrayal, about the listening devices that had almost destroyed her career, about a scared boy who'd found the courage to speak up. She thought about Sophie and the dozens of other whistleblowers the Helix Initiative had helped protect. She thought about the patients whose lives would be saved by the reforms they'd fought for. The world was still broken in so many ways. Powerful people still tried to silence the truth. Corruption still flourished in dark corners. But there were also people like Leo, like Rebecca, like Sophie. People who chose to fight back, who chose to speak up, who chose to transform their pain into purpose. And maybe, Elena thought, that was enough. Maybe that was everything. Somewhere in the Boston night, a phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. Dr. Torres, my name is David Park. I work for a biotech company and I think they're covering up serious side effects in a new medication trial. Can you help? Elena looked at the message, then at Leo, then back at her phone. She smiled and typed a response. Yes, you're not alone. Let's talk. The work continued. The fight continued. The truth continued to matter, and they would continue to tell it.